Thank you, Jack. I'm going to say this. Hello, everyone. So 4 years ago, I moved out of home in Canberra to study here in Brisbane. And for the first 2 years, my mum and I stayed close. We talked on the phone all the time. My dad and I, on the other hand, usually only talked if Mum happened to hand the phone over to him whenever he walked into the kitchen. And now I've just forgot what I'm going to say next. Around the same time, while I was studying creative writing, I was writing a lot of stories that happened to have main characters whose dads had either died or had abandoned the family or something terrible. They caused something terrible in the family. Anyway, it was never my intention to write about daddy issues, but once I noticed it in my work, I started to think, this is really strange. And is there something that I'm repressing or something? So one Friday afternoon, while I was drinking with my housemates on our balcony, I think I pretty much went to the valley every weekend that year, spending the money that Mum and Dad gave me for food on drinks and entry fees instead. And so I was pouring another drink and I get a call from my dad. And I think this is weird because Dad usually only calls me when there's something important going on. So I pick up and he says, I've decided you and I are cooking Christmas lunch this year. It was only August and and it wasn't a question, it was more like an order. He said, you'll have to find out how many people are coming and organise what we're cooking. I was thinking seafood. We're sick of your mother's turkey, aren't we? I've never been able to argue with my dad, so I was just like, yep, sounds great, I'll get right on it. Back to drinking. Anyway, so at this point you should know that my dad has been in the army since before I was born. And whenever he's in charge of something, he runs it like a small military operation. So for example, if he's taking my brother and I to go visit my granny, he'll say, be ready tomorrow at 0900 hours. And this doesn't mean we can be like brushing our teeth or putting our shoes on at 9 o'clock. It means we're in the car, backing out of the driveway exactly at 9 o'clock, otherwise we're running late, and running late is unacceptable. And also while studying creative writing, you know, whenever Dad would hear me complaining about how stressed I was or anything like that, he likes to remind me, I haven't read a book of fiction in 26 years, so there's really nothing to worry about. So Christmas time comes around and I go down to Canberra, and 2 days before Christmas, my dad and I are shopping for the groceries in Coles at 0800 hours. Dad theorised that this would be the most efficient and safest time to do the groceries because all the shelves would be freshly stocked and there wouldn't be too many people around. So Dad was striding up and down the aisles, ticking things off the list that I'd typed up on Microsoft Excel, because I was trying to show him that I could be just as organised as he was. And there I am, pushing the trolley along behind him. On Christmas morning, just after breakfast, I was in the kitchen taking out the sweet chilli sauce and the salad dressings that I'd prepared the night before. I'd lied and told my dad that I cooked this well all the time back in Brisbane. I wanted him to think that I had my life together. When my granny and our cousins arrived, I was running back and forth from seeing them at the table inside to outside where my dad was at the barbecue watching the salmon steaks. I brought him paper towel, trays, tongs, and refilled his glass of ginger beer. And then in the last few minutes before the lunch was ready, we realised there were still all these things that we hadn't prepared for, like what bowls are we going to use to serve the prawns in, and is my cousin still a vegetarian? But it all worked out. And as we were eating, my dad's sitting at the head of the table, wearing his red paper hat from his Christmas cracker. And he looks terribly bored with the conversations that we're having. But I also thought he seemed satisfied somehow. My dad retired recently, and since then, oh sorry, I forgot a bit. Go back. So then on Boxing Day, my dad and I are sitting in the lounge room and debriefing on the day before. He said there were too many leftovers. And I said, well, at least my auntie was impressed. And Dad started talking about what we do differently next year. He said maybe pork instead of salmon. And I said, there's a whole year to decide, like, don't even worry. But at that point I realised that maybe Dad had organised this whole thing of us doing Christmas together as a way to give us something to talk about. And if there's anything I've learnt from my dad always, it's that if you have a problem or something you need to work out, you make a plan and follow it through step by step. So at the start of this year, my dad retired, and he's taken over most of the cooking at home. So now instead, when my mum comes home, Dad's not in front of the TV anymore, he's in the kitchen cooking. And my mum actually gets in trouble if she buys things that aren't listed on the meal plan that Dad set up on the fridge. There's a list for every meal of every day for that month. And a little reference to the cookbook that you can find the recipe in. So handy. And Mum actually gets in trouble if she buys things that aren't on the list. So instead she hides chocolate and muesli bars and chips and everything in our dining room cabinet. And when I come home, she's like, oh yeah, come over to the, I've got chocolates down here. Okay. And so yeah, so now this year I haven't written any stories where a character has a particular daddy issue. Dad likes to call me every now and then and tell me what he's making for dinner. And he runs me through the entire recipe just so I know what I'm really missing out on. Thank you.